Hi everyone, and welcome to our fourth and final session of the week. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed and found the sessions useful this week. So I'm getting now that we're all super experts on double entry, trial balances, ledger accounts, cash books, bank reconciliations. Is that right? Are we all experts, guys? Or do we still need a bit more practice? For those of you that don't know me, I wasn't able to attend Monday's session. My name's Helena and I'm one of the tutors here at Premier Training. So the plan of tonight's session is to take you through journals and suspense accounts, and that generally tends to be the areas that learners can struggle with. So I'm hoping by the end of the session I can give you a few tools and a few techniques to take away to make the questions, the activities, they're just a little bit easier. You know the drill, guys. You've attended the sessions before, I'm sure, but the session will be recorded and you will receive a link to the session at the end of the week. I will do my very best to keep an eye on the chat. So if there's any questions as we go along, or if you need me to repeat anything, then just shout up and I'll do my very best to answer them. So let's make a start. So at the end of tonight, we're going to have a look at problems. So we're going to have a look at what happens when the trial balance doesn't quite work as we think it should. And that's because there's errors within our numbers. And whenever there's errors, it could potentially cause us a suspense account. Now, what will happen with a suspense account, it will give us an opportunity to go away, look at what the errors possibly are, and then journal them, correct them, and make sure the trial balance works. So that's all we're going to do over the course of the next 60 minutes or so. Okay. As easy as possible. We'll certainly try. So the trial balance up until now, and I know you did a session on this with Sam, the trial balance is produced from all the accounts in the general ledger. So all the ledger accounts in that general ledger are extracted, they're balanced off at the end of the month, and at the end of the month, they're put into a debit or credit column. And if we've done everything as it should be, we keep our fingers crossed that we get two columns that agree. The trial balance is only a mathematical check that debits and credits have worked. It doesn't prove that they're right, it just proves that debits and credits have taken place. Now you can see in this question, or in this example, that I've got a debit and a credit column that both agree on £53,750. So I can say with confidence that my debits and credits have occurred and they've been taken place. What I can't say with confidence is that all those figures are right. But that feels odd, because surely if my trial balance works, surely everything's okay. So when you look at a trial balance, you look at the debits, you look at the credits, you total them, they balance, you breathe a sigh of relief. If you were with me on Monday, we talked about debits and credits quite extensively. And we talked about the reason that every transaction must have two effects. And our job as the accountant, the bookkeeper, is to record those two effects. We talked about the fact that every entry has a debit and every entry has a credit. And I likened double entry to a set of old-fashioned weighing scales. So what I basically said was that every transaction must balance. What this means is that when the double entry happened in all of these transactions, that happened. Debits and credits took place. But a balanced trial balance can still have problems, can still have errors within the figures. It just means they're harder to spot. So a balanced trial balance can still have problems. It can still have incorrect figures. How you spot those becomes a little bit more tedious. It's not quite so obvious. I can't just look at the bottom of two columns and think I've got a problem. In time, guys, when you progress in your careers and perhaps you're responsible for putting together financial statements, in time you will become experienced at looking at what those numbers are. And at the end of the month, at the end of the year, you will look at what we call performance indicators. And you will have a feel for what those performance indicators are going to be, there or thereabouts, even though the figures haven't actually been finalised yet. And when the figures don't behave in the way that you're expecting them to behave, it causes you to go and ask questions. And that's how you spot those errors. But they're not obvious. They're not obvious because debits and credits have taken place. Mathematically, everything works as it should. We're going to have a look first at errors that are not revealed by the trial balance. So what I mean by this, guys, is that when these type of transactions, debits and credits took place, but perhaps just not necessarily the right debits and credits took place. So the first one is an error of omission. So that's where we've completely missed something from the account. So neither the debit or the credit is in there. So no impact on the trial balance. And that could be a sales invoice. And if it was a large sales invoice, it would be relatively obvious because when you're compiling your figures, your sales, your revenue figure wouldn't look right. If it's a £10 petty cash transaction, for example, for perhaps tea and coffee, not quite so obvious to discover. And therefore that could go uncovered for some time. So an error of omission is not going to affect your trial balance. Debits and credits just haven't taken place. No impact on the trial balance itself. A reversal of entries. So a reversal of entries, debits and credits have taken place for the right amounts, but they've been entered the wrong way around in the accounts. So for example, if we consider perhaps wages. Wages are an expense. So if we pay wages, we know that we should credit the bank to reduce the asset of bank, debit wages to record the expense. If you were to have a reversal of entries, what would actually happen is that you would credit wages, which feels wrong because wages are an expense and pearls and dead click tell you that expenses are debits. So in this example, we've credited wages and we've debited the bank. But the debit in the bank indicates money coming in, and you know when it's a payment, that can't be right. So a reversal of entries, debits and credits have happened for the right amount, but they've just been entered backwards, but there's still no impact on the trial balance because debits and credits have actually taken place, but just not the right ones. An error of commission. So this is where a transaction has been entered in the wrong account. So let's go think about that wages transaction. So we've paid wages, so we've credited the bank, and instead of debiting wages, we've debited rent. We still use the right category of ledger account, so we've still used an expense account, but we've just used the wrong expense account. So no impact on the trial balance because debits and credits took place, but the debit went through the wrong account. How would that be spotted? Well, it wouldn't be obvious, but again, when businesses are experiencing perhaps difficulty, when there's challenging trading conditions, your expenses tend to be the area that you tend to look at because the expenses tend to be the areas that perhaps you could make cuts. And when you do analysis on your expenses, that's probably when that problem would come to light. Another error is the error of principle. And sometimes learners get confused between error of commission and error of principle. But this is where the wrong type of account has been used. So let's say, for example, as a business, we've purchased maybe a photocopier. A photocopier would generally be classified as a non-current asset because it's something that the business owns, generally will retain for a period of longer than 12 months, and it will help the business function. So in this example, what we should have done is we should have debited an asset account, maybe computer equipment, and we should have credited the bank or maybe a loan, depending on how it was financed. What's actually happened in this instance is the credit has taken place to the bank or the loan account, wherever however it's being financed, but the debit has perhaps gone through a stationary account. Well, stationary, guys, is an expense. Now that's more of a problem, and that will become obvious quite quickly. And the reason for that is because expenses and assets are on two different financial statements. So that will present a problem quite quickly and it'll be quite obvious. I say it's going to present you a problem. It will in terms of your financial statements, but in terms of your trial balance, debits and credits took place. So absolutely nothing is wrong. Your trial balance will still work. We then come across an error of original entry. And this is where we've used the correct accounts, but incorrect amounts. So this could be where we've paid perhaps our rent and our rates, and we've debited 1,000 to the expense account, but we've credited 10,000. We've just put an extra zero on the end. Sorry, Let me say that again. This is where we've used the correct accounts, but the incorrect amounts. And in saying that, both the accounts have had an extra zero added on, or not, as the case may be, they've had a zero missed off. So maybe it should have been for 1,000, but we've used both the debit and credit for 10,000. So we've added an extra zero on, but to both. So again, debits and credits still work. Trial balance still balances. Just the figures, the balances in the accounts are wrong. And then the last one to consider, and we have to talk about this because it is in the syllabus, is what we call a compensating error. Guys, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've worked in both financial and management accountings in both public and private sectors, and I've never come across a compensating error actually in practice. This is where you've got more than one error. The error adds up to the same amount. And that's, I think, personally unlikely that two errors would happen in the same period for the same amounts. Generally quite easy to spot in the exam because they tend to use opposite accounts, which gives you a bit of a clue. So there may be a problem with the sales and the sales returns account, or the purchase and the purchase returns account. So it's obvious to you because they're similar accounts. The amounts will be the same. But again, if I'm being honest with you, in practice, I don't think you'll come across that actually in the real world. 6 errors there, guys, that cause problems with our figures, but our trial balance will still work. So the trial balance I gave to you a couple of slides ago and said that the trial balance works mathematically, my debits and credits agree. Any one of those errors could be present in those numbers, but it's not obvious to us because double entry has taken place in all of those instances. So let's have a go at looking at a couple of journals, and let's have a go see if we can come up with a correction. So I'm going to ask for a bit of feedback here, guys. So a payment for rent of £600 was incorrectly been entered into the insurance ledger. So a payment for rent of £600 has incorrectly been entered into the insurance ledger account. So any ideas what the error is? So we've looked at those 6 errors on the previous slide. Any idea what the error could possibly be, what the name of the error is? And again, guys, if you were here on Monday, I said it Monday, please don't worry if you're not sure. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. Have a go, yeah, because we learn from our mistakes, and we're all here tonight to do one thing, and that's to learn. So we've entered a rent payment, and it's been entered into the insurance ledger account. Gary, thank you ever so much for responding. Oh, I've got another couple, so I'll just give them a moment just to type in. Difficult to get your head around these are because there's lots of different names, and some of you guys may not be that far along in terms of your studies. So we've used the right amount. The problem with the transaction appears to be with the expense side of it, the debit side of it. It doesn't talk about the bank, guys, and therefore we have to assume the bank's happened as it should. So we've got an error of commission or an error of principal. And guys, everybody gets these confused. They really do. And I remember when I first learnt these many, many years ago when I did my AAT, it took me ages to get these the right way around in my head. It is an error of commission because I've used the right type of account because both rent and insurance are expenses. I've just used the wrong one. What this problem means is I haven't got a problem with my debits and credits. My trial balance will still work. But the balance in my rent account and insurance account won't be right. We've got to correct that. So some of you will look at that and think, well, I know what to do. I'm comfortable with that, and that's great. But some of you guys may be further along in your studies than others. Some of you may just be getting to this topic. Some of you may not even be there yet. So I'm going to give you just a tool that hopefully will help you no matter what stage you're at. It's a tool that gives you structure. And I'm a firm believer that structure gives you confidence and confidence gives you marks. So let's have a look at 3 steps that will help. We can consider what did happen, what should have happened, and then that will enable us to do the correction. What did happen is we get it from our scenario. Okay, we just read the question. So let's do that. So a payment for rent of £600 has been incorrectly entered into the insurance ledger account. Okay, so what did happen is I debited insurance and I credited the bank. As I said, there's been nothing in that question that's given me any indication there's a problem with the bank, so I assume that happened as it should have done. What should have happened, this is the challenge, because what should have happened we get from our own knowledge. And that's why on Monday when we were together, I harped on about how important it is to be comfortable with debits and credits. And if it means taking an extra week or so in terms of your timetable to embed that knowledge, please do so. Because how can we put things right when we don't know what should have happened in the first place? Guys, anyone out there want to have a go at what should have happened? What should have been the double entry for this? Where should I have debited and where should I have credited? What should have happened, guys? Perfect. That's brilliant, guys. Well done. Spot on. Absolutely. So I should have credited the bank, shouldn't I? Absolutely. And thankfully I did. But you're quite right. All of you have said I should have debited rent. Okay. So this is where I'm going to come up with a correction. And as I said, some of you would already be there. I'm going to ignore the bank because the bank happened as it should. I should have credited it, and I did. So the bank is fine. I'm not going to touch the bank. I should have debited rent, and I need to do that. And in doing so, I need to credit insurance to remove the incorrect entry. So debit rent, credit insurance. Okay. And that's all I've got to do. I've just got to make sure I understand what did happen, what should have happened, and then I've got a correction. Let's have a go at another one, guys. Let's see how we get on. So again, this error will not affect the trial balance. This is a payment for electricity of £400, and this has been debited to the bank and it's been credited to electricity. So my first question is, what's the type of error? What's the problem? So we talked about 6 errors. What is the error that I'm describing here? A payment for electricity of 400 has been debited to the bank and credited to electricity. Yeah, Mel, you're absolutely right. It's the wrong way around, isn't it? Perfect. Well done. Yeah, absolutely. Reversal of entries, guys. They're the wrong way around, aren't they? They're backwards. Absolutely. Now, I don't know whether you remember, but when they're backwards, we have to do something different when we do the correction, and we'll have a look at that. So again, I'm going to do my 3 steps, my what did, what should, and the correction. What did happen? Well, obvious in this, guys, because the question is telling me that. So I debited the bank and I credited electricity, and instantly that's wrong, isn't it? Because we know that expenses are debits, and when we make a payment, it's a credit through the bank to reduce the asset. So I know I'm clearly wrong here. What should have happened? Well, I should have debited electricity and credited the bank. So I've used the right amounts and I've used the right accounts, but you're quite right, I've got them the wrong way around. So anyone want to be brave and have a go at what the correction is? And remember, if we get it wrong, it doesn't matter. There's no judgments in these sessions, guys, because we're here to learn. What do you think the correction should be? Where should I be debiting and where should I be crediting? Okay. And if you're not sure, look at what should have happened. That's a good indication as to what should have happened. Okay. Absolutely. Well done. That's great. These take practice, guys. So please don't think that instantly you're going to be comfortable with this, because you're just not. It's not the way it works. This is tough. And just because it's a level 2 activity, it is difficult. So it will take time and it will take practice. But we've got lots of study resources available to help you with that. People are saying I've got to do the opposite. I've got to debit electricity and credit the bank. You're spot on, guys. But whenever you have a reversal of entries, and this is a really common mistake people make, they just do it for the same value. Now, if you do that, the problem you'll have is you'll just clear the accounts back to 0. So if I do debit electricity and I credit the bank, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to 0 the error out. There won't be an error. but the payment of electricity won't actually be recognised in my accounts. And I think we've got some people alluding to this. I need to double it up. Okay, so whenever you identify a reversal of entries, please make sure, or put simply, when things have happened the wrong way around, please make sure that when you do correction, you double the figure up, because the first transaction will remove the incorrect entry, the second one will record the correct one. In your assessment, you may be given two templates, two little tables. And if you are, then you need to do one for 400 and then you need to do another one for 400. So you kind of need to do the same journal, but twice. I can't predict the layout in the assessment for you guys. I can't. But what I can say, if you get two tables, do it for 400 twice, or that figure twice. If you're given one table, just double it up. Okay. And that's examples of errors that are not revealed by the trial balance. The trial balance in all of those instances will still be okay. They'll still work. So coming on to the slightly harder stuff now. When we have a breakdown of double entry, when debits and credits are broken down, we need a suspense account. And when having a suspense account, it will enable our trial balance to temporarily agree. Now, the reason that you may need a suspense account is because obviously things have gone wrong. And as a business, you may need to be able to close the ledgers quickly and to move on to the following month's transactions. I can't stress the word temporary enough, guys, because ultimately your trial balance is the starting point for your financial statements, which is something you look at as you progress in your studies. But there is no place in your financial statements for a suspense account. So we've taught you different types of terms. We've taught you about assets and we've taught you about liabilities and expenses and revenue. And as you progress with your studies, we'll go on further to tell you that certain types of those transactions will appear in the statement of profit and loss, and others will appear in the statement of financial position. But there's no place in either of those statements for a suspense account because it should be investigated and removed before you get to that point. So this is where we've got problems. These problems are going to cause me an imbalance in my trial balance because in all of these examples, I don't have double entry. My double entry is broken down. So I could have a single entry transaction, which means the debit took place, but the credit didn't, or vice versa. I could have a situation where I've recorded two debits or two credits. So my payment for wages, I debited wages, but then I debited the bank. Okay, again, double entry is broken down. My scales don't agree. My double entry isn't working. My trial balance won't work. I could have recorded different amounts of my debits and credits, which is what I incorrectly said earlier. So I could have debited 100, but credited 1,000. Again, my double entry is broken down. My trial balance won't agree. My suspense account will be created. In all of those top three examples, guys, if you're operating on an accounting software system, there should be sufficient controls in place that prevent that transaction happening, because there should be a red flag that says, hey, stop, there's something not right here. Debits and credits have got to work. Okay. So if you're operating in an accounting system, hopefully there'll be a safeguard, there'll be a control in place that stops you doing that. But guys, we talked on Monday about the fact that if you're a sole trader, you probably won't have the funds to be able to have a software system. You could be doing this manually on paper. You could be doing it in Excel. It's so easy to get distracted by a phone call, a colleague, a customer coming in. So easy to get distracted and make an error. We're all human at the end of the day. And the last error, which sometimes gets a little bit overlooked and students struggle with the concept is when we transfer all the general ledger accounts into the trial balance, we miss a general ledger account. So let's just say we've recorded or we've purchased a non-current asset of motor vehicles. And we purchased that from the bank. So we debited motor vehicles, say £10,000, and we credited the bank 10,000. All the general ledger accounts went in, but we missed the motor vehicle account. So when we total our trial balance, our debit column will be light because the credit is already in there. It's hidden in the bank figure, but the debit isn't. And all four of those transactions, guys, are going to cause us a problem. Are going to have an impact on our trial balance. Our trial balance won't work. Our double entry is broken down. We'll need a suspense account. And that's where it gets a bit tricky. So let's have a look at Bradley Enterprises. So Bradley Enterprises is a company, and they've made a payment for heat and light of 1218. It's been correctly recognised in the expense account, so in the heat and light account, but no further entries were made. So I've got my debit, but I don't have an opposite entry. So instantly I have a problem. My double entry's broken down. I've got wonky scales. If you remember on Monday, I talked about the fact that for me, I always visualise double entry as having those perfectly aligned scales. The debits and credits, they've got to work. And in this example, they don't, guys. So what I'll need to do is to create myself a suspense account. And that suspense account will have a credit balance of 1218. The debit has taken place, but the credit didn't go through the bank. And therefore, the credit side of my trial balance will be light, meaning I'll place temporarily a credit of 1218 in a suspense account. Okay. Now that can't stay there. It has to be removed. We know what the error is. So it says a payment for heat and light of 1218 has been correctly recognised in the expense account. No further entries were made. Okay. Let's see if my what did, my what should, and the correction helps. So guys, I've got my suspense account and I've got my 3 steps. I'm going to do what did. I'm going to ask you to do what should. So in terms of what did happen, I debited heat and light and I didn't credit anywhere. Guys, what should I have done? Where should I have debited and where should I have credited? What should have happened? Let me see your double entry skills here, guys. Yeah, perfect. Super. Excellent. Guys, perfect. We're all on the same page. Absolutely. Lovely. So you're quite right. We should have debited heat and light, which is the expense account, and we should have credited the bank. Credited the bank reduces the asset of bank. So the question that a lot of students will say to me is, I don't get when I do or when I don't need the suspense account. I'm just not sure. If you're doing what did, what should, and the correction, that actually is quite easy to get your head around. Because in the did scenario, if you don't have double entry, like in this example, if you don't have double entry, then you will need a suspense account as part of the correction. If in your did scenario, double entry has taken place, admittedly not the right one, but if double entry has taken place, the suspense account will not be featured as part of the correction. So I'm going to say that again. Students sometimes struggle with knowing when a suspense account is or isn't required as part of the correction. If in your did scenario, like in this example here, you do not have double entry is broken down, your scales are wonky, then as part of the correction, you will need a suspense account. In this example, I didn't have double entry. I'm going to need the suspense account to form part of the correction. The heat and light account, guys, happened as it should, so I'm not going to touch that. But I need to credit the bank to reduce the asset of bank. And where do I debit? Guys, where do I debit? I'm crediting the bank to reduce the asset of bank to record the payment. But where do I debit? Absolutely. And you're already there, aren't you guys? You're telling me the answers. Perfect. So I'm going to debit the suspense account and credit the bank. And then the acid test that you've done it right is having done that, your suspense account should clear because there is no place in that final accounts for a suspense balance. And I'm happy because my debits and my credits on my ledger account of suspense is clear. Perfect, guys. So this is not me standing here tonight saying you've got to use this what did, this what should, the correction. It really isn't. All I'm hoping is it's giving you a little bit of structure and a little bit of a technique to go away and have a go at some of these questions. What did will always be given to you in the question. What should, That's the challenge that's coming from your own knowledge, but that will come with time and practice. What I would say, guys, is it doesn't matter whether you're able just to do it by looking at it and instantly know. That's fabulous if you can. Or in the exam, you've got to get that scrap piece of paper out and write down the did, the should, and the correction. As long as you get the same answer, as long as you get the right answer, that's all that matters. And you'll have plenty of time in your exam if you want to use this technique. Let's go on and have a look at different types of problems or different types of questions that we could come across. So Bradley Enterprises has the following trial balance. Okay, and I can instantly see, guys, I've got a problem here. My debits and my credits don't agree. So I've either got a single entry transaction that took place, debits and credits have not the same amount, I've missed the ledger account. Can you tell me what the suspense account balance should be and whether you think it will be a debit or a credit? So whether you think the suspense account will be a debit or a credit, and once you've established that, how much should it be for, guys? How much should it be for? Excellent. Well done. Fabulous. Absolutely. You're all singing from that same hymn sheet. That's perfect. Yeah, okay. So we've got a figure of 2862 and we're all in agreement on there. The purpose of the suspense account is to get my trial balance to agree. So I can see that my credit side is 239,868, but my debit side is lighter. So my debit side is the one where place I'm going to put the suspense account, because in doing it, it will bring them both up to the same point. Okay. At this point, if I was in business, I could close my ledgers and I could allow the sales team, the purchase team to go on and do their jobs, their invoices, their credit notes for the next period. Me, the accountant of the business, us, the accountants of the business, would then need to get our heads around what's gone wrong here, because that can't remain there. And we generally, as accountants and bookkeepers, would have a period of a couple of days to complete our month-end process. So I've got a problem, and that problem gives me a financial issue of 2,862. I need to get rid of it. In this question, the question's been kind to us because it's actually told us what the problem is. It's told me that there's a problem with the bank balance, and I can see that in the top table. And it's told me I've got a problem with the sales balance, and I can see that in the bottom table. So, and I keep saying this, and I'm trying to make it sound so easy, but it really isn't. All we've got to do is process those journals into the trial balance figures I've just given, and our trial balance, if we keep everything crossed and we've done everything right, will work. Let's have a go. So that's my trial balance. It does balance, but only because there's a suspense account there, and we know that can't be. So there's my suspense account. I've got a balance brought down of 2862. It's a debit. And through, hopefully, those journals that I've just shown you, we're going to remove those and redraft the trial balance. Guys, I can't remember what the journal was, so I'm going to bring it up for us to see. So it was to credit the bank of 1,500 and debit suspense, and then credit the bank and debit suspense. So the same thing, we're going to do it twice. Now, again, some of you will look at that and think, yeah, okay, all I've got to do is increase the bank by 3,000. Okay, well, you wouldn't be wrong. Yeah, that's absolutely the right thing to do. But the numbers in this are quite straightforward. What happens when the numbers become a little bit more awkward? Or what happens when you're starting with an overdraft, but you'll ultimately come back to an asset balance? So I just want to show you a tool that hopefully will help you and give you a little bit of structure to tackle these type of questions, regardless of how complex the figures that we're dealing with. The bank is the figure that we need to amend, and we can see that because that's the figure in the journal. So I'm going to get myself a bank T account, and I'm going to have a balance brought down in there of 3,451. That balance brought down is the balance you can see in the trial balance. It's an overdraft. It's a credit balance I owe the bank. And then I'm going to process the journals. Okay. So I'm going to credit the bank with 1,500 and debit suspense. And remember from Monday's lesson, we just talked about the fact that the narrative we use will always be the name of the account where the opposite entry is sat. And then I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to credit the bank and I'm going to debit Suspense. Okay. Now, I've used this technique for years since being in education, and it is bulletproof. But where a lot of learners tend to go wrong is they forget to put the opening balance in. They forget to start with the balance brought down. So you must put the balance brought down in, because it's that figure that you're adjusting. So I would like you to work out the new balance carried down, the balance brought down on the bank for me, guys. What's the new balance carried down on the bank? The new balance carried down on the bank, guys. So I've started with 3451. I've processed 2 journals of 1,500 each. So that should give me a balance carried down of, you tell me. Fabulous, guys. Well done. You all agree? Absolutely. So we know how to balance off accounts now. The balance carried down is 6451. 2 totals with a balance brought down of 6451. So the figure that was originally given me in the terms of the bank overdraft now is amended, and instead of it being 3451, it now becomes the new figure that you've just calculated for me. Okay. I'm not balancing my Suspense account off at this point, guys, because I've still got more work to do on that. But the bank figure has changed. Let's do exactly the same now for the other journal. So I've got my trial balance. It's still not going to work because I've only processed and corrected 1 figure. The other journal talked about sales, and it told me that I got to debit sales with 11,724 and credit Suspense, and then I've got to credit sales and debit Suspense. Okay, my Suspense account is there. It's still got my bank entries in. Hopefully, after all these transactions, my Suspense account will clear, and that gives me confidence that what I've done is right. I've pulled in the sales account, and I've pulled in the opening balance that is currently there, currently represented, of 177,972. So all I've got to do, and I know I make it sound really easy, but all I've got to do is put the journals in and balance the account off. So I'm going to debit sales with 11,724, and I've credited Suspense, and I've used the names of the opposite accounts. And then this time I'm going to credit sales with 582 and debit Suspense. So you know what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to work out what the new balance carried down is on the sales account. It was 177,972. Processed 2 journals, guys. One that's reduced it, and then one that's re-increased it. So what is the new balance carried down on the sales account? Excellent. Lovely, guys. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, you're perfectly right. It is 172,110. And actually, I'm even happier because my Suspense account works, and your Suspense account should clear. And when I say clear, what I mean is the debits and credits should agree. There should be no balance carried down on your Suspense account because there's no place for it in your financial statements. So meaning, guys, when I substitute my sales figure into my trial balance, if I keep everything crossed, should work. Okay. And it does, and I don't have a Suspense account. That question is easy in as much as the correction was given for you. All you had to do was process it into the numbers. But sometimes, guys, those numbers can be quite complicated, and sometimes the journals can be in and out, and just makes you a little bit more confusing. For me, if you use your ledger accounts, you're doing it step by step. So there's limited opportunity for you to miss a transaction and obviously make an error. Again, You don't have to use that, but if you're going to use it, please make sure you put the balance board down in, because that is key. The balance board down is your starting position, process your journals to get your closing position, and that will do the job for you. Guys, errors and corrections, they're not easy and they will take time, and they can feel incredibly frustrating because just when you think you've got it, a bit like double entry, you're not quite sure again. You have that moment of doubt. We're here to help. We're here to support in whatever way we can. And I know I said this on Monday, and I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I'm going to say it again. Practice does make perfect with these. So the more questions you can expose yourself to, the better. And please, don't hesitate to get in touch if you want additional resources. We have got them. We can share them with you. Guys, I know you've got your individual tutors, and they're obviously your first port of contact. But if there's anything specific relating to tonight's session or Monday's session or any of the sessions that you'd like to discuss with me, that's my information, and it would be lovely to hear from you, and I'll do whatever I can to help. I hope tonight's helped. I hope tonight's given you a few little tools and techniques to take away, to have a go with, to have a practice with. You will be given a link to the presentation, so you'll be able to go back, stop, pause, rewind as and when you see fit. But if there's anything I can help with going forward, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Guys, are there any questions? Is there anything I can help with this evening? I always used to say to students when I actually taught face-to-face that I always assume silence means you're all good and I'm okay. Fabulous. That's great. Guys, thank you ever so much for joining me this evening, and for everyone that's been part of all the sessions throughout the week. I hope you've really found them insightful. I hope you've taken a lot away from them. And as always, guys, if you need us, we're here to help. It's our job. Thank you ever so much, guys. Have a great weekend. See you soon. Thanks, guys.